Good afternoon, this is Pastor George Nemec, Norway Baptist Church. Thank you for tuning in and thank you for visiting the channel if you are here for the first time. I would like to talk about an interesting phenomenon. It's an interesting phenomenon of weaklings out there talking about how they're making tough choices. And I'm talking about tough choices. See, tough choices are made by tough men, and it takes a tough man to make a tough choice. Here is why you need to make a tough choice, because you get into a situation where you have a self-interest on one hand, but then on the other hand you have that you know which is right, and you're gonna decide for that which is right. That's what makes choices tough. It's nothing tough about deciding to buy ice cream, right? And it's not tough to decide in between chocolate or vanilla or strawberry. That doesn't count for a difficult decision. But what is difficult is to take a pain, discipline yourself, deny yourself. And that's what makes it difficult sometimes for people to make choices. And I have seen both. I have seen people in my life, and even in today, in many places, that have the character and have the capacity to make a tough choice. And boy, it's a beauty to see. We need people in a position of authority and power that have the character and quality and integrity to decide not according to what will benefit them, whether it's a matter of gain or whether it's a matter of preserving themselves, saving their back, but actually in some ways giving themselves for the rest of us. That's what you require from people that are in position of leadership, like pastors and parents, and of course also kings and people in government. The problem is that we see a lot more of weakness and weaklings out there and softies than those that actually are tough. But we do hear politicians talking about how they're making these tough decisions and tough choices, portraying themselves as these people of strength and iron and principle, when in fact they do exactly the opposite. They undermine the principle, and they whatever the decision they adopt, they do that because of their self-interest and some biases. The Bible says that there is a certain man, certain quality and certain attributes that make a man of honor. And we could say maybe really a tough man that is able to make right decisions because it's a man of integrity of character. And I can't think of a better place than to go to Psalm 15 to describe such a man. So if you don't mind, let's go there. Psalm 15, I'll quickly read it. Lord, who shall abide in thy tabernacle? Who shall dwell in thy holy hill? So essentially the writer is asking, okay, who is good enough to be in your presence, God? And this is the answer. He that walketh uprightly, and worketh righteousness, and speaketh the truth in his heart. Number 2, he that backbiteth not with his tongue, nor doeth evil to his neighbor, nor taketh up a reproach against his neighbor. Number 3, in whose eyes a vile person is contemned. Number 4, he honoureth them that fear the Lord. Number 5, he that sweareth to his own hurt, and changes not. Number 6, he that putteth not out his money to usury. And number 7, he that taketh not reward against the innocent. And the Bible promises in the end of that psalm that he that doeth these things shall never be moved. So it's a great promise. In other words, if you are that kind of a person, you know, nothing is going to overwhelm you. You're going to be fine. You're going to make it through difficult times. Now, this is pretty good. So right from the get-go, it tells us that a man like this is obviously going to be a decent, honest, righteous, and true man of integrity, man that says what he thinks and thinks what he says, and what he thinks even is good. All right? Farther, he's not a person that's going to do a harm to a neighbor. A neighbor doesn't mean just a person living next door, but just any fellow man. It also says that he's going to hate evil and he's going to love good and love those that are humble before God and fear him. It also says that he sweareth to his own hurt and changes not. I like that one in particular. That's basically a person that will make a commitment and keeps that commitment even though situation changes. now it's not so advantageous as it was when I was originally signing the contract. But you know what? I promised, so I'm gonna keep my bargain. That's a man of character. Further, he that putteth not out his money to usury. In other words, let's say in general, we're not talking about a person that will take advantage of other people calamity, but it will help without attaching strings. And finally, he that putteth not out his money, he doesn't take reward against the innocent. So he's not going to be easily purchased to witness this way or that way, whatever will benefit him and do what somebody asked him to. And that's a quality man. And I would say that's a good man, and that's a man of toughness. That's a tough guy. Now, we have a lot of people that are making decisions. For example, in the politics, we have people nowadays in the time of COVID so-called pandemic that they decided to open the economy. And they say, okay, it's time to restore liberty. We've had enough of this, and we've looked into this, and we can see that science is telling us that nothing is prevent us to actually reopen the economy and move on. Well, this takes some toughness, because there is a lot of people that will, oppose this, including media, including so-called experts, the Dr. Fauci's and Dr. Tommy's of this world, and they will be against it, including, let's say, United States, the President Biden. He said that the decision of the Texas governor to reopen his economy was a Neanderthal decision. So in other words, he's saying that you are idiot and you better not do it. And so it took some guts to reopen the economy, and the man did it. On the other hand, you can see that people actually make the opposite decision, and they present it as that is the difficult and tough decision. That is, we're gonna keep everything closed down, nobody's gonna be able to meet, church is not allowed to be open, we're gonna arrest the pastor, we're gonna find you to oblivion, we're gonna take your driving license away, we're gonna destroy your life unless you behave exactly as we say, because that's what we decided. And these people, they call this as a tough decision. Well, I'm not so sure about that. How come we have these so-called tough decisions and yet the outcome is completely opposite? Let me give you another example. Let's think about a marriage that's in turmoil. Romance is gone, it's difficult. And now let's say the guy finds some sexy babe in work. She likes him, he likes her. And so he's going to have some kind of tough talk with his wife, and he's going to switch for this other woman. So is that a tough decision? Some may say, well, that is a tough decision. It's not easy for him to tell her, look, I don't love you anymore. But it's obviously not really that tough decision. It's just crooked, you're selfish brat and wicked person. And what actually would be tough is to say, you know what, I realize there's a woman that would be interested in me, but I made a promise, for better or worse, till death do us apart, so I am sticking here to this wife. I realize that she picked up some weight, I realize that the romance is gone, but I am going to keeping the bargain that I set at the beginning. I'd say that's a tough man. Or let's say a girl that became pregnant because she was somewhat foolish, but now she is stuck with a potential baby, and she is going to keep that baby, even though it's going to somewhat destroy her options for career, and it's going to be expensive, and maybe guys are not going to be interested in her, but she's going to do it anyway. I'd say that's a tough girl. And the girl that goes to abortion clinic and kills that baby, to me, that's not tough. All right? I don't care how much you say it was tough. It was not tough. The tough would be to keep the baby. So there is tough and there is so-called tough. I'll give you two more examples of so-called tough. The caricature of toughness. I'm thinking about the Hell's Angel bikers, right? What do they come up? In a big, thick leather jacket with skull on it, with thick rings, with big, thick beards, and with thick glasses and big helmet and big, loud motorcycle. And mean and scary look. And that's supposed to be a tough guy. Well, that's not a tough guy. That's a caricature. And as I once heard in one movie, you know, beauty doesn't ask for attention, and I would say that neither any virtue asks for attention. And if I see somebody that's beaming and screaming at me, hey, I'm tough, then I'd say you're not tough at all. You're a caricature of toughness. Another one would be, let's say, the gang of some thugs, you know, that will pick up a victim, drag it into some kind of dark alley and beat that person to oblivion until he will give them what they want. You know, you're not tough, you're a weakling, you're a thug, you are a rascal, you are a wicked man. Now the reason I'm talking about is because there is two men that I want to talk about. This man, his name is Gian-Carlo Carra. Comes from New York but lives in Calgary. Is a Calgary city councillor for electoral district called Ward 9. And this man, this is also living in the same place. He's a pastor, Tim Stevens, of Fairview Baptist Church, that's been arrested on Sunday for holding services against the public Alberta Health Services order. And both these guys appear, and some will argue, these are tough guys. This is a tough guy, some people say. And some people say this is a tough guy. Well, the funny thing, these guys are in opposite. They are in clash. And we'll talk about it. We'll try to analyze which one is the good tough guy and which one is the thug. So in the Bible, we will find examples of tough guys. I mean, real tough guy, according to Psalm 15. I can think of, for instance, of Apostle Paul. Apostle Paul essentially gave up his life. No family, no children, no career. But I'm going to give my whole life for the purpose of spreading the gospel everywhere I can. And he did it. The reason we have Christianity in Canada is essentially because of Apostle Paul. Because that's how Christianity went to Europe and then to North America. And what happened to him? He suffered a lot. He was dragged before courts. He was beaten. He crushed in ships. He was bitten by snakes. Who knows? All kinds of stuff happened to him. But you know what happened when they stoned him? They stoned him at least twice. He would get up and keep preaching. I'd say that's a tough guy. Another example of a tough guy I can think of is Peter and John. See, Peter has his lows in his life that were not very strong. But here he is strong. This is where he goes to the heart of the problem, Jerusalem, in the middle of hatred of Jesus, and goes right to the temple and they preach gospel there, Peter and John. They get arrested, they get beaten, and they are threatened to not preach that thing anymore. And you know what they say? You consider yourself, should we obey God or man? And then they go and preach again. I'd say that's some tough guy. Do you see some thick beard and some mean look? No, probably these people actually look pretty humble and simple. In fact, Apostle Paul is known, we kind of get the idea from 1 Corinthians letter, that his physical presence was rather weak. He was not some kind of big tall guy with deep voice, but rather probably maybe a feeble person. I don't know. But not necessarily screaming at you, I'm a tough guy. No, not at all. But the greatest of all example of toughness, I can't think of any other but Jesus Christ. Jesus goes around and nobody dares to question him because he's so brilliant in the answer. Nobody can trap him. But finally they arrest him because Jesus lets them. They drag him down to court and they humiliate him and punch him and beat him and all that stuff. You know, they are big, tough guys. But actually in the whole theater of that abuse, the tough guy is Jesus, not these people. Because Jesus is doing this voluntarily for the sake of saving humanity from their sin. And even when Jesus is hanging on the cross, there's a lot of people out there, and some of them are mocking Jesus. Hey, you were making something of yourself. Why don't you come down off the cross and show us, hey? But you know what Jesus does? Does nothing. He forgives. He says, forgive them, for they know not what they do. To me, that's a tough guy. Knowing very well that in just a few hours he's going to perish, he's going to go down to the hell, he's going to be forsaken of the Father, and he will do it anyway because he loves people, because he cares for them, and because he made a promise. I can't think of a better example of a really tough guy. Now, we're getting there. Is this guy like Jesus or like the Jews and the mockers? And is this guy like Apostle Paul or like the mockers? We'll get to that. Now, one other example I will give you of a thug is Herod. Herod is the one that killed John the Baptist. Why did he kill him? Because John the Baptist dared to criticize the government. He told the king that he was not supposed to commit adultery with that woman. And so Herod arrested him because, hey, you don't criticize the government. And but that was not enough. This wife of Herod, he wanted to actually have John the Baptist killed. And she trapped Herod in such a way that Herod gave her a commitment that he can give her, she can ask for anything up to half of the kingdom. And what did she ask for? For the head of John the Baptist. And now Herod is facing a dilemma. It's a very interesting sample here. So what is he going to do? He doesn't want to kill John the Baptist because he actually liked him. And second, he knows that this would be politically problematic because a lot of people actually liked John the Baptist. So he didn't want to do that. On the other hand, he made a commitment. And it was a public commitment to the wife. And so he told her, you can have anything you want up to half of the kingdom. And so if he doesn't do that, he's going to look like an idiot because, hey, you made a promise. So he is between a rock and a hard place. Tough situation. So what sort of a guy is he? Is he a tough guy or is he a thug guy? Yeah, he's a thug guy. He is rather going to kill John the Baptist than to admit that he's an idiot, he made a stupid commitment, and he cannot martyr just because he made some vow. And that's what he did. So let me now, and by the way, he goes on. In Acts chapter 12, it just shows you. This was maybe not the first murder that he committed, but he goes on. He kills James, the brother of John. Then he wants to kill Peter. Then he kills some other people. Then he wants to put some other people into the judgment. You know what finally had to put stop to it? God. God just killed him on the spot. Right when he was bragging about himself the most. That's where God put a stop to it. But the beauty of that chapter, chapter 12 of Acts, is that what it says. In the end. But the word of God grew and multiplied. And the reason Herod was doing all these things, because he wanted to stop the gospel. And he did it because it pleased the Jews. That's what every politician does. Huh? Lick the finger and then feel which way the wind is blowing. Let's go that way. People of no character. That's what Herod was. And so he would be killing and doing all this stuff. Stop the gospel because that's what Jews hated. Stop it. Stop the gospel, stop the preaching, stop the Bible, stop the churches, and essentially what it is about, stop the Jesus Christ. Now I appreciate that we have people like Pastor James Coates or Pastor Tim Stevens, that even though they are giving order by government, which is illegal, they will not stop and will preach anyway and assemble anyway. I admire that. This is worthy of honor. And I would say that this person has turned out to be a decent man and a tough guy, because he knew what was coming if he was going to preach. They kind of warned him, and he did it anyway, not because he's a rebellious person, but because he fears God more than he fears government. I'd say that's honorable. But let's think about this guy now, okay, Mr. Carra. I want you to listen to what he said when Pastor Stevens was arrested. I am glad that this gentleman has been arrested, and I hope that we throw the full extent of the laws we are able to, because there is no excuse for putting lives in danger, especially if that excuse is some warped interpretation of the Christian faith. So first of all, we can see that this guy is actually happy that Pastor Stevens was arrested. He is happy that he's taken from his family and 7 children, from his friends, and put into the prison and humiliated in front of the whole province. Not only that, he wants this guy not just to be punched and brought down, but he wants to be punched all the way down to the floor, like those thugs in the valley somewhere where nobody's looking. And he says that the reason for that is because there is no excuse to put lives in danger. When Pastor Stevens put no lives in danger, okay, there was no outbreak of COVID anywhere, and on top of that, there is not really a pandemic. All you have to do is just separate if you're sick, and everything is going to be fine. That's how it always been, and that's how it will always be. You don't need to come up with these stupid ideas that everybody's to wear a mask and we all have to be vaccinated. That is a propaganda, and this Mr. Carra is part of the propaganda, like other people in the government. And places like Texas, Louisiana, and Mississippi and Florida are an example of it. They open the economy, nobody's dying. And nobody's dying in our province and our country either. 99.95% are going to recover if there are 70 and younger. That's like a 5 people out of 1,000. No, 10,000. You know, that's not pandemic. That's obviously always sad, but that's not a pandemic. More people die on flu, and probably more people die on vaccines than on the stupid COVID. That's the fact. And Mr. Carra is either a liar or is just ignorant of the facts. But what is most disturbing about his statement here, this is what he says. Especially if that excuse is some warped interpretation of Christian faith. Now this is really interesting because, isn't that interesting? There is always people that know what is the truth, and they are going to tell us how we should believe and how we should understand things. And I'm curious, what are you, Mr. Carra? Are you some kind of Bible thumper? That you know everything in the Bible? I know, I mean, I don't know everything about Pastor Stevens, and I don't know him personally, but I've listened to some of his preaching, and I can tell the guy knows Bible. You know, he may have a little bit difference here on how to interpret this and that, but for the most part, he sees things right. So what about you, Mr. Carra? Are you some kind of theologian or something? So this is what I learned. Mr. Gian-Carlo Carra is a non-practicing Catholic. What does that even mean, to be a non-practicing Catholic? That's like a non-practicing guitarist. It's like a non-practicing mountain climber. Like, that's nonsense. Either you're a Catholic or you're not a Catholic. And if you're only Catholic if you actually believe it and practice it. And if you don't practice it, then you're not a Catholic. Well, just admit it. It's not such a shame to not believe it and to just think some kind of vague idea there is something out there. It's okay to say that. Just don't pretend you're some kind of half religious. But especially don't tell us that you can understand what is the proper understanding of Christian faith when you are non-practicing Catholic. Then he says, that's the beautiful thing about the long arm of the law. That's this toughness. You know, he's going to be a tough guy here. It doesn't maybe act immediately or swiftly, but it gets there. See, that's the guy that wants to punch the guy all the way down through the law. And I'll remind you of this principle, Mr. Carra. Let's remember that church is an assembly, it's a congregation. It is established by God, that's sovereign, and that's even recognized and established by our Charter of Rights. Our Charter of Rights gives us the right of peaceful assembly, and there is the whole idea of separation of church and state. I mean, haven't we learned that government are the state of the business of regulating and controlling the church? Are we going back to the Middle Ages, to the rule of the Jesuits? They're going to tell us you gotta believe as we say. Is this what these people want from us? From these non-practicing Catholic and Jesuits and all that stuff? Who do you think you are? You will never accomplish this. I realize there's going to be a lot of religious organizations and churches that will comply with your control. But there will always be a church that will never submit and accept the idea that now government is the king over the church. That will never happen. I'm sure you will accomplish a lot, but there will always be people that will defy you. And they should, because you are out of line and you are actually not on the side of the law, as you proclaim to be, but you're actually on the other side of the law, and you are illegal, sir. And then he says also that the people that like Pastor Stevens, that's just this minority, like the fraction of the society. Typical talk. Yeah, everybody's with me and you're nobody. Okay, so the question is this a real hero? No. To me, this is an ambitious bully, a zero. Now, in closing, I would like to recall a story of King Rehoboam. Rehoboam was a descendant of King Solomon, and when he was crowned to be a new king, he received a delegation with a petition that was asking him to release some burden that King Solomon unwisely applied to the people. And they were begging him, please give us a break. This is what he said in 1 Kings chapter 12. We read from verse 4. Thy father made our yoke grievous, Now therefore make thou the grievous service of thy father, and his heavy yoke which he put upon us lighter, and we will serve thee. And so the king listened to the petition. He said, okay, you want some break? And you know what it was about? It was about high taxes. And you know what does it mean when there is high taxes? When there is a high taxes, that means that there is a heavy government, heavy boot of the king. And they were asking, please give us a break. It's really too hard. And we are suffering. Release us. And so he says, okay, give me 3 days, come back, and I'll tell you what I'm going to do. And then we read in verse 6, and King Rehoboam consulted with the old man that stood before Solomon his father while he had lived, and said, how do you advise that I may answer this people? And they spake unto him, saying, if thou wilt be a servant unto this people this day, and will serve them, and answer them, and speak good words to them, then they will be thy servants forever. And essentially what it means, it says that, sir, if you want their loyalty, and you want to do the right thing, then be their servant. They are right. It really is bad. You should give them a break. All right, so he's listening to that. But then we read this, but he forsook the counsel of the old man. And let me go back. What they advised to the king, treat them as, look at yourself as a servant to these people. Because that's really what kingship and government is about. You're not there for yourself. You're not some kind of big shot and everybody has to bow down before you, like many people require. What it means that you're going to be a servant. You are their servant. You know, the whole idea of a minister is a servanthood. And prime minister, for example, or premier, is a person that's the top minister. Kind of like Jesus was the top minister and he washed disciples' feet. But he forsook the counsel of the old man, which they had given him, and consulted with the young men that were grown up with him and which stood before him. Okay, so this is not good. This is not going well. Because rather than listen to some wisdom of the elderly, he's going to listen to his buddies that grew up with him. You may as well stand in front of a mirror and consult with yourself. You're asking your buddies because you only want to hear what you already planned in your heart. You want to hear what you want to hear. And they advise him basically this: my little finger shall be thicker than my father's loins, and now whereas my father did lade you with heavy yoke, I will add to your yoke. My father has chastised you with whips, but I will chastise you with scorpions. And so that was his answer. So in other words, he is like Pharaoh that says, oh, you think it was easy that my father did? You think you had a hard time? Guess what? You're going to make it, I'm going to make it even harder. I'm going to make it tough for you. And you're going to give me more taxes, and you're going to work harder and double output, and don't you dare to question me. And that's a bully. That's a thug. I am glad that he's in prison. And I wish he was even worse. I wish he was just completely destroyed. You're a thug, sir. So let me remind you, I promise I will remind you. Remember what you said, sir? That's a beautiful thing about the long arm of the law. It doesn't maybe act immediately or swiftly, but it gets there. And we know that principle. You know, that saying, the mills of God grind slowly, but surely. Right? You will always get there. And you know what happened to Pharaoh? He drowned. God punished him. You know what happened to Rehoboam? He lost his kingdom. 75% was gone. Maybe not so much, but 70% was gone. And all the revenues and the glory, everything. You know what happened to Herod? He died nasty and humiliating death. And there is too many examples to count of people that put themselves above the law of God. And I realize these people will go and say, well, no, this is illegal because there is a rule that applies to everybody. It's an illegal law. That's the whole problem with it. And if you come up with a law that puts into a prison a righteous man of truth, honor, great reputation, great care for his people, somebody that fears God and is even willing to suffer for the truth, and you come up with a law that puts that kind of a prison, then you have evil law. That's what it is. That's what it is. Now the question now is for us this: who is our counselor? Who is my counselor? Are we gonna consult with the old man, with the wisdom, like this old man, the book, of the life? Or are we going to listen to new trends and ideas and whatever people pull out of their finger? Who are we going to listen to? No one can really escape the dilemma of critical and difficult situations where we have to make difficult choices. And here is what will decide whether you're going to make the right choice or bad one. It's going to be it's going to be all about fear of God and love of Him and obedience of God, or it's going to be obedience of man and fear of man. So that's going to be one of them. And the other one, similar, is it going to be about love and serving to others, being a minister, being a servant, or is it going to be serving yourself, your ambitions, and your pride, and your lust for money and power? What is it going to be? Everybody has to answer for themselves. In closing, not impressed. Not impressed. Impressed. Thank you, Pastor Stevens. Thank you for your stand. Thank you for your obedience to God. Thank you for your love to community, to the lost, to your congregants. You're an inspiration. And you're the real tough cookie. And we ought to look up to you. You deserve the honor. And that's all I have to say. I'll appreciate your comments if you can contribute to the discussion about the ongoing turmoil about our religious rights and freedoms in general in our province and in our country. Please chive in. Thank you for listening. This is Pastor George Nemec, Narrow Way Baptist Church.